All right, y'all. We live again. Technical difficulties. Your boy never really went live before like this. So, just to reiterate what I was talking about before, today, there's a lot of misinformation going on, a lot of sensationalism in the news, a lot of just, the media's really getting a lot of clicks, feeding us fear, and it upsets me. So today we're gonna have my one of my best friends, who is an infectious disease pharmacist, come on and kind of give us the down low. So if y'all have any questions about diseases or viruses or antibiotics, any type of stuff in general, just comment them. I'll try and get to them, but this is just coming from a normal, uneducated person and asking an expert. So I just wanted to share one of the resources that I have. I'm lucky to know this guy. So anyways, I'm going to get him on the conversation, and here we go. Yo. All right, we live.
What's up, man?
So this is Daniel Salas, everybody. One of my best friends, long time, since like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. So just so happens you're now an infectious disease pharmacist. So man, I just like, I don't know if you caught what I was just saying, but the media has just been kind of killing us lately with all types of sensationalism. My theory is, they're gonna feed us bad news and ensue panic, to sell us those newspapers, and then once the bad news doesn't sell anymore, they'll sell us good news, and not to say that the bad news is not necessarily not happening, but and sometimes the panic is good because even now with all the bad news flying around, people are still out and about. So man, I would love to just see what you have to say on the situation, because I was checking in with you since late January maybe about this virus and what it is, and how it's going to affect us.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying has a little bit of truth to it. Depending where you get your news from, you might hear a different story. Obviously, if you turn on like CNN, you're going to get a lot of criticism about how our government response was to this outbreak. You listen to other media outlets, they might try to play it down and say, oh, it's not that serious. So I think you kind of just have to find the sweet spot, the balance somewhere in between. I can only speak to experience that I have personally with my own hospital and talking to colleagues that work at other hospitals nearby and around Los Angeles. There are some major issues in terms of how we responded to it. Initially, when we started seeing patients coming in with symptoms that could be consistent with, COVID-19 or influenza, because the symptoms tend to overlap, we had difficulty obtaining tests for these patients. And that's one of the primary strategies to try to curb the spread of the disease, is to get people tested, figure out who's positive and get them isolated and potentially get them treated. So that was one of the major issues. Fortunately, it seems like just now, over the past few days, we're starting to get that better under control. We're starting to have tests more readily available for patients. That was lagging as recently as up to a week ago. But yeah, if you want to talk like comparisons to how this disease compares to similar diseases or pandemics in the past, the most closest comparison would be the SARS outbreak. That was around 2002, 2003, also in China. In terms of spread, that one spread a lot less, infected a lot less patients. I think it was somewhere on the order of around like 8,000 total for the entire pandemic.
And that's worldwide?
Yeah, for SARS. It primarily stayed in China, actually. Whereas the COVID-19, which COVID-19 is the name of the disease,
Yeah.
the virus that causes it is the SARS coronavirus 2. So it's pretty much just like a cousin of that virus. They just decided to call it SARS coronavirus 2. That one is spread a lot more efficiently. And there's, different theories as to why it behaved differently and why it spread so much faster. But one of the, I think, key differences between this SARS this time compared to the SARS of last time was basically how patients presented. We're starting to see that a lot of patients can actually display pretty mild symptoms. Basically, for people who don't know, so the coronavirus is actually, there's 7 different types now. Most of the coronaviruses are what cause the common cold that we experience, seasonally. I get a cold pretty much once a year, usually around this time or maybe earlier in the winter. So this is just a variant, a different strain of the coronavirus that happens to cause potentially more severe disease. And it depends on the type of patient that gets infected. Initially, and still what we're seeing for most of the cases, it's usually elderly patients, patients with comorbidities, history of like chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, or underlying pulmonary diseases like COPD. Those are the patients who tend to have more severe disease and are at higher risk for mortality. But what we're seeing now, especially more recently, and even anecdotally from talking to some of my colleagues who work at hospitals around here in the LA area, is we are starting to see a lot of younger patients, patients our age, people in their 30s. I think one of my colleagues says she has a patient in the ICU who's young, late 20s. And so I think a lot of people initially, what the thought was, and you may have seen it on the news, those spring breakers who went out in Florida and are like, I don't really care about coronavirus, this and that. I think that is dangerous. The government does put these kind of control measures into place for a reason. Part of the reason we were super successful, back when SARS had the outbreak, or not we, but in China, was they implemented some of these, I guess what some would consider, pretty draconian measures of locking people down and saying, stay inside your house. But the reality is that those strategies are important. And especially so for a disease like the current coronavirus, COVID-19, simply because there's such a wide spectrum of disease presentation. You could have it, not know you have it, and be pretty much mildly asymptomatic, and be passing it around to, other people. And in terms of like shedding, it was pretty different from SARS in that, the peak shedding of the virus happened when you were pretty symptomatic. So you knew you had the disease and you were spreading a lot. But some of the recent studies are showing that this COVID-19, you could actually be spreading it pretty early before you even become symptomatic. And so I think that's one of the main differences between this one and what happened last time in 2002.
I see. So you're saying that, the hard part for me, where I think it's like misrepresented in the media and stuff like that, where I get confused is where, we're tracking this virus. Like say if we were to track the normal flu throughout the year, it would be a crazy task. One, it would probably ensue panic to see how many people are dying from just the normal flu that goes around each year. And the flu is super contagious as well, right?
Yeah, depending on the study you look at, and it varies from season to season, just because the strains pretty much mutate pretty rapidly, so you get a different strain pretty much every season. That's why we always have to vaccinate every year. But they look at a number called the R naught, or the reproductive number. Essentially what it is it's an estimate of if one person has the infection, how likely are they to spread it to, X many number of people or whatever. And so I think the R naught for flu varies, but it's somewhere between like 1 to 2. Okay. Close to the 1. And with this COVID, I think the most recent studies are estimating somewhere between 2 and 3. So maybe even as high as 4. So
Oh,
its
okay.
ability to spread is, I guess, a lot more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of mortality, it's pretty much no comparison. The mortality is much higher with this current COVID virus, SARS coronavirus too.
So my qualms. Oh, for y'all just tuning in, this is my homie Daniel, an infectious disease pharmacist, and we're just going over the current situation, trying to get to the bottom of all the information that's going around. So my whole like thing with statistics and all that. So when I hear those statistics, my skepticism goes, okay, the people that were first infected are typically going to be the weaker. Is that safe to say that the people that are going to catch it first are typically people that are more likely to receive the virus?
Yeah. So if you're looking at the measure that they use, the case fatality rate, it may be overestimated simply because of the way that we're testing. We're only going to test someone who's displaying symptoms.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a problem, especially here in the U.S. If you look at the number of people we tested compared to some of the countries that had a more robust response to the pandemic initially, places like South Korea, Singapore, they were testing a lot more people per day than we are. I remember when we first started seeing cases, I mean, they had to change the definition of who even qualified for a test. Before, we were only testing patients who had a recent travel history to China.
Okay.
Until we had the first patient in California who, presumably didn't have any contacts with anyone in China, yet somehow got the disease. And so basically CDC had to change the recommendation and say, okay, now we got to start screening basically everybody who comes in with symptoms that are consistent with potential COVID-19, and we've ruled out other causes. So that's what I'm seeing done at my hospital is patients coming in with like shortness of breath, fever, cough, basically the classic symptoms of what could be COVID-19. We're testing them for everything. Obviously, flu season is sort of kind of dwindling down now. We're testing them for flu. We're testing them for we have this rapid diagnostic test that could test basically a panel of like, I think it's up to 12 of the most common respiratory pathogens. So we're testing them for that. And those come back within, 24 hours. It's a pretty quick turnaround time. And if those, all those tests that we're running, if they all come back negative, then we're pretty much obligated to test for COVID-19. And that's when we're sending these tests. So we're rationing and, not testing everybody. But I think that is kind of a problem. We should be testing more people. And then like you alluded to, as you start to test more people and start to catch some of the more mildly symptomatic patients, you'll start to see that number go down, the case fatality rate, because your obviously it's just, basic math, numerator and denominator.
Yeah. Like I think the statistics, like, they're skewed right now and they're flawed. And also another thing that we don't really talk about, like, for example, I was in San Francisco in January. I was with two friends and they live in Beijing. They just like escaped Beijing to come to the US before they had the lockdown in China. This was late January. And at that point, like they could have had it, right? So the fact is like people like the illusion that the virus, it just came here. It's like, no, it's actually been here since it started. It's been here since China was experiencing it. The whole world has probably been experiencing it. And maybe there's less travel happening between certain areas, but like people that had the coronavirus in January in the US, well, either passed away, never got tested for it, or they recovered, so that they're not a part of the recovery number because they were never tested,
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I got sick around January when I went snowboarding up in Vancouver, and I feel like I probably could have had it,
Yeah.
I came down with like I don't know if I had fever because I never get my temperature, but I had like, you know, cough, sore throat.
Yeah.
Not necessarily shortness of breath, but obviously like
Yeah.
I'm young, relatively healthy. So I may have had a very mild case of it. And that's hard to know because we never got tested.
Yeah. Yo,
There are there's
Larry's
experts.
tuning in right now. What's up, Larry? Man, I haven't seen that dude in forever. I miss that guy. So yeah, so like what I was saying, dude, in January 1st, man, like I was deathly sick on New Year's. Like I slept for 24 hours one day, and that could have totally been it as well. You know, all these sicknesses, it's hard to really differentiate. But when it comes down to it, you know, like, what do we do now? I mean, this is the situation at play. There is panic right now. There is, you know, like, where do we go from here? Obviously, we see the charts and we see the spiking in the infections. But I think the biggest problem, and what I don't know if you've experienced at your hospital yet, is like being overrun with people that are worried, just worried that they have the virus, and
Yeah.
then two, just being overrun with sick people. So just normal people can't get into, they just can't get like any treatment. So like, for example, if everybody thinks they have the coronavirus and they're storming the hospitals,
Yeah.
and most likely a lot, like 98% of them will recover. But the problem is now you got, say, an old person falls and breaks their leg or something, and they can't get surgery because it's overcrowded, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the situation is at other hospitals. From what I hear, it's like some hospitals are actually pretty, you know, backlogged. A lot of patients are coming in. Fortunately, my hospital, we're doing all right. We're not overwhelmed. Our cases are not, you know, through the roof like some of the other hospitals. So we're actually maintaining, but I think it's good to, you know, take these preventative measures to help us avoid getting to that point. And obviously, you know, one of the main strategies is social distancing. I think social distancing is definitely going to be crucial. You know, the mayor tweeted yesterday that despite the lockdown, there was a ton of people still going out, like going to parks and beaches and stuff, and not really taking it too seriously. So I think he tweeted he's closing down those as well. So I think it's important to take those recommendations, but it's also important to not freak out like the other end of the spectrum. I think some people are just overreacting, like the people going to grocery stores and just hoarding toilet paper and water and like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you need to do that. And obviously that's not practicing social distancing if everyone's lining up, you know, big crowds at the supermarket. I mean, you're probably just increasing your chances of getting it. So I think you just have to find the balance. I think it is important to, you know, practice social distancing, and that will help, you know, as they say, flatten the curve. But at the same time, you know, you don't need to freak out and go hoard toilet paper because that's not going to do anything.
Well, yeah, no, as far as toilet paper goes, I was like looking around at the trees around my house. I was like, man, like people really think it's toilet paper? I'm like, yo, worst case scenario, I got mad plants, you know, like I got so many plants I'm not allergic to that I could potentially use. It's just, I mean, toilet paper is not going to save you from the end of the world. I mean,
Yeah. I got a couple unmatched socks. You know, I have a drawer with just like unmatched socks.
yo, I never even thought about that.
So, you know, just
Like
got some
all
socks.
those unmatched socks over the years, yo, I got a bucket full of those.
Yeah, dude, I got a ton of unmatched socks.
Yo, I got a whole box of clothes I'm trying to donate, you know, they just repurposed. uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, I think it's crazy. I think, I don't know. I get worried for places. You know, I had plans to go to Argentina, which are looking very bleak now. I still holding on to my plane ticket. Now you just came from Colombia.
Yeah, so that was kind of a crazy experience because like this was before the whole, I mean, we knew COVID was going on, but it was sort of before the whole like mass hysteria happened. And I mean, prior to all of this, we were thinking like, oh, it's fine, you know, pretty much like within the, I think it was like 2 or 3 days before we left for Colombia, Colombia had only had one case and LA had had like 54 cases. So we were like, yeah, you know, it's probably better if we just get out of LA, ride it out for a bit, stay down in Colombia, and then come back.
Yeah.
That was obviously the wrong, that was a miscalculation on our part because things only got worse. And then in Colombia, I think they did take a pretty aggressive response, and you know, rightfully so, to you know minimize the burden on their healthcare system. They started closing down a lot of the bars and restaurants. Not permanently, but they closed them early. So there was pretty much towards the later days, towards the end of our vacation, there wasn't much going on in terms of nightlife. And then we started hearing, you know, news about airlines, you know, canceling flights. State Department was talking about, you know, shutting down borders. And then we started freaking out. We're like, crap, you know, if we don't leave Colombia now, we might be stuck down here for like the next month or two. So we cut our vacation short and came back. But fortunately, you know, things weren't too crazy when we were in the airport. When we got back to LAX, very low, you know, wait times. It was probably like the fastest I've ever gotten through customs from an international flight to LAX because there's just, you know, it's pretty much a ghost town, like no one's there.
Well, that's kind of weird though, right? Like, shouldn't they be screening you more at customs?
Right, yeah, it was weird. So they screened us. We went from Medellin to Bogota. When we landed in Bogota, they actually screened us. They had one of those thermometer guns and, you know, aimed it at our forehead. Took our temperature, and like me and everyone I was traveling with, we all passed fine. I was surprised when we got to LAX they didn't have one of those, which is pretty interesting.
I'm like, man, just letting Corona in, man. Yeah, it's just, I think I get worried too, man, a lot. Well, I was telling you I have this ticket to Argentina, and my flight's April 16th. Now, that's like, I'm 99% sure that's not happening. And this is my rationale. Not just because I can't get on the plane necessarily. Well, Argentina's closed their borders till the end of March, but most likely much longer, because it wouldn't make sense because they do have fairly few cases down there right now. But at the end of the day, like, why would they let somebody from a hot spot just come into their country, you know?
Yeah, and if they do, they'd probably be like, oh, okay, yeah, come in. You're on a mandatory 14-day quarantine, and they'd probably just put you in a hotel and make you stay there.
Yeah, which is like, yeah, there goes the trip. And then, yeah, India, like I had India planned for May 16th, and like, so that's out the window. Most likely, things aren't turning around as fast as we thought they might. And for me, what I would say, like, what do you think about Argentina? Because the whole southern hemisphere is going into winter. So we're coming out of our flu season, and then they're going into their flu season. So my thought is, like, what is this going to do to, one, international travel? Because we might contain our virus here, but then, you know, it goes rampant somewhere else.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I'm not sure what would happen in that case. I would imagine that they would still want to keep up their, you know, be vigilant about transmission of the virus, and they would probably still keep a lot of those safeguards up. So I think you're right. It would probably be difficult to travel down there, and it probably wouldn't be the same experience as prior to, you know, this whole pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like, you know, with all this time on our hands, all these people, we all got time on our hands, like, and for some, it's not good. Like, you just start to drive yourself a little crazy. But the theories for me, I'm trying to play this little chess game in my mind, and as far as, okay, how do you see this virus getting contained in, a timetable, or it's hard to say because they're saying, is it seasonal? Is it affected by temperature? Some say no, some say yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is still all theories. There's no like definitive answer to how this virus behaves, but with regards to seasonality, I don't think it's necessarily the temperature that has like a biological effect on the virus itself.
Mhm.
Because it'll survive in, even in summer temperatures, it's not too hot. I think more seasonally has to do with like human behavior in terms of like how humans gather during the winter time and stay more indoors as opposed to going more outdoors, stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know how this whole thing's going to shake out. Our cases are still continuing to go up. Like I haven't seen any signs of it slowing down.
Mhm.
But China has started, to contain it. It looks like they're having less and less new cases each day.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing, like I wanted to run by you too, is like, so I was doing a little bit of like statistical analysis, but this, like, just looking at the numbers, it's really confusing. Like, a bad flu season in the US is like, I forget the number, but I think it was, wait, hold on, let me see. That the annual flu in the US is something crazy. Like 2017 to 2018 year was like notoriously bad.
yeah,
Um, uh, I think it was something like 45 million. Is that right? 45 million had the flu, something like that.
yeah, it's
Um,
the order of millions for sure.
yeah. So as far as that, and then you're looking at right now, we have worldwide 300,000 cases of coronavirus.
Hmm.
So I'm like, 45 million versus 300,000, and how much this has affected our economy, the stock market, everything's shut down,
Yeah,
and how is this, how do you how do you justify the reaction of everybody to the numbers? That's like the media is sensationalizing it. Let's see, 2017 to 2018. Um, let's see the numbers. I'm trying to find the charts. What if you had to recommend like a site or a source for somebody to look up like legitimate statistics? What would that be?
for COVID, I like the Johns Hopkins live map. They have this like live map where they put together. They
Uh,
basically pull all the most recent data. If you just Google like Johns Hopkins COVID map, you should be able
mhm.
to find it. But it's like this live interactive tool where you could like zoom in on regions. You could do like California, Los Angeles, and you could see like live numbers in terms of like active cases, recovered,
Yeah,
people who died.
yeah. John Hopkins. Yeah, that's a good site for sure.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, I mean, to think about the number of people affected by the flu per year, the amount of deaths of just the normal flu per year
yeah,
compared to what we're seeing worldwide in Corona, uh, it's staggering. And I get so upset at the media. Like, so I forget what news channel, it doesn't even matter. They're all blowing these crazy stories, but one is like they're everybody's scared to be like Italy, right?
yeah,
And no doubt the situation there has got to be super crazy, right? But what they show in the news is this: they showed like 5 army trucks, and they're saying that they're carrying dead bodies off because they're like shipping dead bodies off in these army trucks because they don't have room for them.
mhm,
And I'm like, how does that inform us of the situation at all? Uh,
yeah,
it's just ensuing panic. Like, you don't want to be like that. So, it's crazy to me. Then on top of that, we're talking about what I've heard not really anybody talk about is in Italy, like the culture as a whole. One is it's based on family. right? So you're talking about multi-generational homes. So you have, you know, from grandkids to kids to you know, parents, grandparents,
Yeah.
they're all living in the same home. How does the Italian culture eat? Is family style eating. They're all eating from the big dish in the center. How do they greet? It's like kiss on the cheek, you know? It's like
Yeah.
it is the perfect place just culturally. Then I was like, okay, let me look at the population and the age, right? 23% of Italy is over 65. 23%.
Yeah.
They're the second oldest population to Japan. So they're now you're talking about their cases skyrocketing, but it makes perfect sense, you know. But the media is showing army trucks shipping off dead bodies, like
Yeah. I mean, the situation there is pretty terrible. Like their hospitals are overwhelmed. They're short on like mechanical ventilators, which are needed to help these patients breathe, more so these older patients who get the really severe disease.
yeah,
Um, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that the situation out there is like pretty messed up. Um, in terms of total deaths, they've already surpassed China, which is kind of crazy.
that's
Um,
super crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
So,
also have you know, China is a dictatorship, so they can put down crazy laws to make people stay inside.
yeah.
Um, and you know, I was gonna call my friend either today or tomorrow. My friend who lived in Beijing, and he was on lockdown from late January till like maybe a week or two ago. Um, and they just like I think he was saying he had to like the cops would come take his temperature every morning, or they would or he would have to text his temperature in, and he was only allowed to leave his house like 2 times in 15 days. You
Yeah.
know,
It's pretty crazy.
it's like super crazy lockdown measures. But before I put all that like in stone, I would have to double check with him. But he said it was really strict.
Yeah.
And so here it's like, you know, it's not going to be like that. No, nobody's going to be arresting people for stepping outside their house. It's like against the Constitution, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like really up to us to kind of be disciplined about it. But yeah, man, the older population is the one that I really worry about, you know, because I'm connected to that like indirectly but pretty directly because, you know, my mom, she works for a senior care facility.
Yeah.
So they're on complete lockdown and like, you know, up until maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I started really, no, 2 weeks ago, I started really quarantining because I was like, yeah, I don't care if I get the virus, but if I get my mom sick and she doesn't have symptoms and then she's walking around like all these old people,
Yeah.
it's it's like it's not something to play around. So I was like, dang, I gotta be super strict, you know.
Yeah.
But her facility's on real lockdown. They get their temperature taken all the time.
Yeah.
But the saddest part about it is, um, that these older patients aren't going to die from the flu. They're going to die from isolation. Um, you know, they're dying from being alone because their family can't see them. You know.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad. I guess it's like a catch-22. I mean, you don't want to visit them and potentially get them sick and be the cause of their death, but at the same time, you know, they're at old age, they're at the end of their life anyways, and they're kind of just isolated right now. So hopefully it's not for too long. I mean, as far as the lockdown goes, my understanding is it's through the rest of the month, right?
Well, I mean, the federal, it was a 15-day lockdown from like, I think March 16th or something. So March 31st.
Yeah.
But then, Newsom, the governor of California, he didn't even put out a date, you know.
Yeah.
So
Indefinite lockdown.
indefinite lockdown, which, I mean, looking at China, my guess is that maybe the federal steps out of it and makes it a state thing. Um, but most likely,
Yeah.
I think I foresee the federal government stepping in and making it mandatory, maybe another 15 days.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because the states are so different, right? Like California and New York is going to be so different from like North Dakota or something, like,
Yeah, yeah.
state. So,
That's true. It would make more sense to put it at a state level, local level, especially like the urban centers of like city of LA, like places where population is super dense.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, if you just look at like the outbreak in the US, if you look at New York's numbers, like they're ridiculous.
yeah,
They're carrying the large majority of our cases. It's like New York and Jersey and California. So,
yeah, man. Um, so, there was, have you heard of any stories of young people getting it and dying? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I heard of one,
Yeah, there
where,
was the guy in it was the case in Glendale. It's published. It's like, I think Pasadena Star News or San Gabriel, the local newspaper, did a story on it. But yeah, a young guy. He's like 34 here in Glendale. He went to one of our local hospitals here in LA. But from what I was reading, what happened was he was on a business trip and then took a few extra days to check out Disneyland or Disney World out in Florida. Came back, started having symptoms, and then was admitted to the hospital, was in there for a bit. And I think the newspaper did the story pretty much pulling information from Facebook posts from the sister. And she was giving like daily updates on his progress. And yeah, eventually towards his last day, he just tanked, was sent to the ICU, intubated, and then eventually passed away, which is crazy. He's 34. Which
yeah,
it's starting to get real now. Like before I was just like, I don't mind if I get it. I think I probably already got it. But just seeing that, even young patients can potentially have pretty negative outcomes is kind of scary.
yeah. I heard that story, but I mean, this is where like the problem is like with our media sources. I feel like they're just not accurately reporting. I didn't do too much digging on this case, but that what I heard, well, I heard that he was 34, he was on a business trip, all that sort of stuff. But then the things that they left out was that he had testicular cancer before. He also had asthma.
Yeah.
And those are things
asthma
that
is like a huge asthma is like a big risk factor. Yeah.
yeah, anybody with like
obesity is also a risk factor as well. Like obesity or morbid obesity. I don't know if he was, but
yeah. So as far as you were mentioning like the it being seasonal, the like it or it not being seasonal and it's not affected by temperature, but it's more about how we act during those seasons. So when it does go to summer, like as we are locked down in our homes, we are limiting our exposure and stuff like that. But at the same time, we're also, it is contained in our homes. But like when it comes to summertime, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to, actively spread? I mean, there's still a lot of contact in summer. It's just, outside.
yeah. I mean, I don't know how this virus is going to behave. If we take it like, our experience from the past with the coronavirus that caused MERS and then the coronavirus that caused SARS-1, then my hope is that eventually we'll just eradicate it and it won't come back for a while. And it'll kind of follow that same trajectory of like pandemic goes away, stays away until like the next basically what happened with these last two cases with MERS and SARS is this virus, it lives in its natural host, which is a bat. I think they're still studying this current one, but I think the most likely theory that they're running on is that this originated in a bat, crossed over to what they call like the bat is the natural host. It crossed over to an intermediate host. So before for MERS, it was camels. For SARS-1, it was this animal called palm civets. It's like a cat almost, or kind of like a cat raccoon, like something in between that. I don't really know how to describe it.
Oh yeah, civet. Yeah, I know civet.
Yeah.
It's like those things that eat the coffee beans, you know?
Yeah. How would you describe? Is it kind of like a raccoon, like, or a cat?
Yeah,
it's
almost like a prairie dog, like a ferret, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the intermediate host for the SARS back in 2002. I think they're still trying to determine what the intermediate host for this one is. It could have been multiple animals. They're not sure. But my hope would be that we eventually eradicate the disease. You know, it dies off. We're not natural carriers of coronavirus, or at least not this one.
So when you say intermediate, so, you know, there's a lot of stuff going around as far as, oh, somebody ate like bat soup or something like that, or
yeah.
So you're saying that there is an intermediate host where like a bat infects another mammal and the mammal is able to pass it to a human?
Yeah. So, I mean, the bat is the natural reservoir. So it's living in the bat and not killing the bat. And I don't know if it's killing the intermediate host, but it's jumping from the reservoir, which is the bat, to some sort of intermediate host, some sort of mammal that are commonly seen at these, you know, wet markets in China, where they have all these like different exotic animals. And then it's crossing over somehow, or spilling over is the term they use, where it crosses from an animal to humans. So yeah, I don't know, because right now there's 4 they're called human coronaviruses, and those are the ones that I talked about earlier that cause the common cold. It's like coronaviruses and rhinoviruses, and those are pretty much seasonal. But these pandemic outbreaks are basically different strains that shoot up and then cause pandemics, and then eventually we get them out, under control, and they go away. You know, because we're not having any more cases of MERS, we're not having any more cases of SARS-1. So I would anticipate that hopefully this behaves the same way, and we eventually eradicate it. But I'm not a virologist. I'm not an expert. I think some people have said that this is going to, permanently become part of like a new seasonal thing, like the flu, which I don't know if that's the case, but that would suck, obviously. They're developing a vaccine, which, that would change things also. If we get a vaccine and could potentially get it even more under control and then stop the spread. And if the vaccine's able to completely eliminate it, then, we might get back to normal until eventually, the next outbreak happens. Because this is just like Mother Nature. It's going to happen, especially if we continue to have these, exposures to like wild animals in these markets in China, where this virus originated. It potentially could happen again in the future.
Yeah.
I don't want to scapegoat China and these wet markets, because these are the running theories, at least for SARS and for MERS. MERS, I'm a little less familiar with the story, but my understanding is it went from bats to camels, and specifically these camels that they use for like tourism, for like riding. So I think the verdict is not out yet in terms of where this current virus came from, but the suspicion is obviously that wet market in Wuhan.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, like I've been in a lot of those markets before. Like they even have stuff like that in Vietnam and stuff. But that's interesting. So it's not necessarily from so both of these SARS things came from bats, and then they had a secondary host that transmitted it.
So basically, you can't just get directly infected with the strain that infects the bat. It can't infect humans. It doesn't have the right machinery or the right mechanics to infect our cells. So it's not viable. But somehow, in these markets, the virus will mutate just enough within the bat and mutate just enough to still be viable in an intermediate host. And that intermediate host will carry it, and it'll replicate, and then maybe it'll get infected by a different strain of the SARS virus. And then those two strains will recombine and then create this other virus that's, slightly different, mutant. And then, you know, just the right set of factors, a human comes in and happens to either, you know, touch the animal. You don't necessarily have to eat it. You know, you just be interacting, moving the animal, whatever, aerosolized droplets or blood, whatever. You touch your mouth and your nose, and then suddenly you get it. And this mutant virus is has just the right, you know, mechanics to be able to be viable in a human host. And then that's when you get it. And then humans spread it to humans, and then you have this pandemic.
So there's just viruses that animals carry that aren't viable in humans. But like say like a horse or a dog or a cat or more common things, they get viruses that we can't get, right? Yeah. And so those viruses, say, because it seems like all these really dangerous ones are coming from a bat. So is a bat like notoriously disease ridden? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to worry about like bat exposures. Like patients come into the ER with like potential like bat exposure or bat bite. We have to give them like the rabies vaccine and rabies immune globulin. Ebola is thought to originate from bats. Ebola is like super scary, obviously. And then MERS, SARS, SARS-2, all those coronaviruses that cause severe respiratory syndromes, those all originated in bats. So yeah, I don't know why. It's crazy. Bats carry a lot of crazy viruses.
Yeah, and then you hear about the swine flu, which is like that originated from birds.
Yeah, I think those are from like migrating birds, like ducks or I think chickens is where it originated from in the markets in Asia. So yeah, there's the avian flu, and then the swine flu is like
avian flu. Yeah, avian flu, and then swine flu is from pigs, right?
Yeah, I think that one originated from like pigs in Mexico somewhere. Or I think there's a few theories on where that one originated, but yeah, swine pigs. Yeah.
Dang. Crazy, man. It's so crazy how it can start. But they're always existing around us, you know. It's crazy to me that it's like this is a big wake up call. I feel like there's a lot of people, including myself, but like you get caught up in this this momentum of life, this kind of 9 to 5 sleepwalk type, and then all of a sudden the system kind of breaks and you realize like, oh shit, like you know, this can all fall apart.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, for me, it kind of made me think like I try and come up with like the worst case scenario, and then I come to grips with that, and then when I can come to grips with that, then I'm cool. My anxiety's gone, you know. For example, like for a lot of people, I'm lucky. I'm really fortunate in the sense that I don't have a family or people I have to provide for necessarily. So for me, I only have to depend on my own mental world, and I don't have to provide financial. I'm like, yo, you could take all my savings, you could take my job, you could take everything, and I'm still like this living thing that can survive and move around and be okay.
Yeah. Same. I'm very fortunate that I don't have any kids right now. So.
Yeah. It gets tricky. Yeah, it's scary for parents, I'm sure. Yeah, man, because like I with my trip coming up to Argentina, I was just thinking like, man, they're going into winter. The economy is already on edge. You know, their inflation rate is crazy. You know, what would happen in their situation if the virus really overloaded their hospitals?
Yeah.
It's a scary thing. So, yeah, you know, it initially started off as this virus that didn't feel like it could really, you know, it's a flu. I could get over it. I'll get really sick and I'll be all right. But then it's like thinking about everybody else. And if everybody gets it at a similar time, then it becomes a real problem.
Yeah.
So as far as it's crazy that people are at the beaches and parks, because I was going to go to the beach, right? Because I don't What's
Initially, it
that?
seemed like a good idea for like social distancing, but I
Yeah.
guess, I mean, talking to like my roommates, they said they went hiking and it was like most crowded they had ever seen the trail. And so,
Yeah.
like usually
Yeah.
when I go hiking, like it's like me and myself, and there's really not, I encounter like one or two other people. But I guess
Yeah.
this weekend, like a lot of people, because there was nothing else to do, a lot of people went hiking and going to the beach and stuff. And like even I went to the park this weekend and there was a ton of people out. I went
Yeah.
by myself and I tried to, obviously I kept like a 30-foot radius for myself and like everyone else at the park. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of, I don't know. Some people obviously overreact, right, and go and stock up like crazy at the supermarket, and then some of, I guess, us younger people kind of dismiss it and say like, I'll be fine. And that's, I think, the wrong approach to take. Also, you kind of have to find that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not really doing it for myself, honestly. I'm just like, well, in a sense, I am because I just don't want that weight on my shoulders if I like am responsible for someone else's illness.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's the right mentality to have. Is like, yeah, maybe you won't be affected, but don't be selfish, because you could definitely do damage to someone who's not as lucky as you in terms of like health. Someone older or someone who does have like underlying asthma or something like your COPD that you wouldn't know about. So yeah,
yeah,
you're not going to get sick necessarily, but you could potentially have, a major impact on someone who's not as healthy.
yeah, yeah. Because I was like, ah, man, the beach felt like a real good idea with the social distancing, but then I realized like, shit, everybody's off work now, uh, so the beaches might be kind of crowded. But I was just gonna go in the water, by myself. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm still gonna buy a wetsuit today, but.
Look into it. I'm not sure, but last I heard was he was closing down like parking at the beaches to try to minimize the amount of people that go to the beach.
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't
mean,
be surprised. Yeah, but
hit me up
this
if you go though, dude. I'm trying to go.
we'll meet there. We'll park like far apart,
Yeah,
and
we'll
we'll
just
like, oh, what's up, man?
we'll just keep like a 10-foot distance, air high five.
That's it, man. And if you're out like if you're out in the ocean, I mean, you're gonna have a fair amount of distance between everybody else. So, yeah, I'm buying a wetsuit today, man. It's my birthday tomorrow, bro. I'm like, it's gonna be a lonely ass birthday.
And come out to North Hollywood, dog. We'll kick it.
Yeah, I'm like, I have to be super careful though, because my mom's situation. I was actually thinking of starting a quarantine, like getting a select group of people and just renting some spot out in Joshua Tree for like, just make it 2 weeks. So it's like a clean quarantine.
Screen everybody. You got to get some test kits. Just test everybody.
Yo, you got the hookup, bro? Yo,
Nah, dude, there's a major shortage right now.
I know. Yeah, hopefully, I mean, do you foresee any vaccine or treatment? I mean, they're talking about chloroquine, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah, so chloroquine is not really used that much in the U.S. So we have hydroxychloroquine, which is the oral form. It's better tolerated and potentially as effective or more effective than chloroquine. So we're actually using that in patients.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, and is it responding well?
So far it's all anecdotal. I mean, I only have experience with the few cases we've seen at our hospital, and the patients, like, they're not doing great. Like, they're pretty sick. We're giving it to them and hoping that it does. Most of these studies, there's one major study, I think it came out of France, that showed it was beneficial. But a lot of the studies are done, they're basically bench studies. So studies done inside a lab. So not clinical, not in actual human patients, but more like looking at cells and looking at how the virus responds. In vitro is what they call it. In vivo would be like, testing it in people like you and me. But in vitro, it shows promise. It shows to suppress viral replication. So potentially it's good. But this study that was done in France, they studied it with another drug called azithromycin, which is a common antibiotic that we use here in America. So that's currently, I think, what a lot of hospitals are using is the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. Anecdotally, some people are responding, so maybe it's good.
So one's I mean, you don't really it's like an antiviral med mixed with an antibiotic.
Yeah, so it's not even an antiviral necessarily. I mean, I guess you could call it that. It's an anti-malarial drug. It's
Yeah.
used for malaria, but it's also used for patients with like rheumatic diseases, so patients with like rheumatoid arthritis.
Hmm.
So it's more like an immunomodulator, modulates your immune system. Azithromycin is also an antibiotic, but obviously antibiotics don't work directly against viruses. The thought with azithromycin is it's also an immunomodulator, so it changes the way your immune system responds to this foreign infection, modulates like cytokines and different inflammatory mediators that coordinate like which cells are going to go and attack and kill like the infected.
Uh,
So it's
so
yeah.
it pumps up your immune system in the sense like it heightens its awareness almost,
Yeah,
right?
it's an immunomodulator. It modulates like certain pathways that potentially could help with clearing the virus. But it's all experimental. It's not really well defined yet.
Yeah, yeah. And vaccines take forever to really
Yeah, I
um
mean, so a vaccine's not even going to treat these patients who are infected. A vaccine is it's just to give to people like you and me who are not infected to prevent us from getting infected in the future and spreading it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
uh, estimates are that those are like a year out before we even get a vaccine. So
So it'll be ready for the next time. But
potentially, and
yeah, yeah,
helping spread, helping reduce the spread of this current strain if we can get it out soon enough. But who knows? We might have it under control before the year comes and may not need it. So who knows? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and at your hospital, are you I mean, you're probably working your same hours. I mean, you're not taking any pay cuts.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm still working, at the hospital, working a lot, and I'll probably be
Yeah.
working at my other hospital as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, man. The how much how many people are laid off and how many people like how many small businesses are really affected by this stuff. So, yeah. Oh, maybe your video's struggling. Can you still hear me, Salas? Oh, maybe we got bad connection. But anyways, y'all, this been real answers, but it seems to be you know, we're in a tough situation at the moment. But the advice is still just to err on the side of caution and just, take this time to like center yourself. Um, for me to cope with anxiety and stuff like that about financial well-being and all that sort of stuff, whether you're losing money in stocks or whether you can't pay your mortgage or your rent, or there's gonna be it's gonna be tough, but at the same time just realize that you are more than those things. You are more than these material things that you possess. um, and to just really try and sit with your thoughts, um, and I think it's just kind of a real it's a reality check. Some people are calling it a dress rehearsal for a major thing. Oh, Salas is back. Hold on. Our expert's back. Hold up.
my bad, dude.
I was just pulling out the pulpit, man. I was
No, I was listening. You keep going. Don't let me interrupt you. Keep going.
no, I was just talking about how just it's these stress managing techniques. This meditation. Oh, it looks like we're gonna get kicked off live in 24 seconds.
Oh,
So I didn't know this thing had a limit, but we could start another one. But yeah, I'll end this one and then I'll call you right back.
all right, man. Later.
All right.